Lesson 3.1b, Terminating and Repeating Decimals. To write a fraction as a decimal, you divide the numerator by the denominator. The division ends when the remainder is 0. So when you're looking at an example like number 1, where you have to take 3/20ths and change it to a decimal, 3 being the numerator would go inside the box divided by 20. Now, it's a fraction, so none of these are going to divide out nicely unless it's improper. So what you have to do is add a decimal, take it straight up, and a 0. Well, now 20 will go into 30 one time. That goes above the 0. 1 times 20 is 20. Subtract. Didn't stop. It didn't end with a remainder of 0. So you continue adding zeros until it does stop. 20 does go into 100 5 times. And now my remainder is 0. So we have changed 3/20ths to 1500ths, 0.15. So that's where you would stop. Now, this talks about bar notation. If you do not have a remainder of 0, but instead you have digits that repeat, you have to use bar notation. So we're looking at one like 5/9. You take 5 divided by 9 and add your decimal and 0. And what happens is 9 goes into 50 5 times, which is 45. But when you subtract, you have 5 again. So if you continue adding zeros, nothing's ever going to change. It's going to continue on indefinitely with a remainder of 5. Once you realize that there is a repeating digit, that's when you use bar notation. You put a bar over the digits repeating. So in this particular problem, it's only one digit that continues to repeat, the 5. So that's why you would answer with 0.5 with a repeating bar. If 2 digits repeat, you put it over the 2 digits and 3 digits and so on. If you would go ahead and put 0.55, that is really unnecessary. I really wouldn't mark it wrong. I just think you need to realize it's only one digit repeating, that's 5. So really you should just put 0.5 repeating. Now, we also can change the other direction, change from a fraction or change from a decimal and put it and change it to a fraction. So if we're looking at this, negative 32/100ths, well, what you can do is actually write it like you would say it. So 2 decimal places is 100ths. So negative 0.32 is 32/100ths. You write it over 100, 32 over 100, and reduce it. So this one you could divide top and bottom by 4. You divide them both by 4. By reducing that, you get the simplified answer, negative 25 or negative 8/25ths. Okay, let's look at some that I would have you do. It says write each fraction or mixed number as a decimal. Use bar notation if the decimal is a repeating decimal. So if we start with number 1, 8/10ths means I'm going to write 8 divided by 10. Add my decimal. This is the work that you should be showing in your homework. And now 10 goes into 80 8 times, which is exactly 80, no remainder, and you can stop. 8/10ths is 0.8. If I look at number 2, negative 3/5, well, just keep in mind, if it's a negative fraction, it doesn't change the fact that it's negative by changing it to a decimal. So make sure you answer with a negative if it started with a negative. So 3 divided by 5 doesn't go in there because it was a fraction. Add a decimal here and then above the bar, add a 0. 5 goes into 36 times, which is exactly 30. So negative 0.10 or negative 0.6 or 6/10. Number 3, 7/11. So 7 divided by 11, add a decimal and a 0. So I'm going to go ahead and say that goes in there 6 times, which is 66. When I subtract, I get a 4. Add a 0, come down here, and I know it can go in there 33. It's 33, and bring down a 0. And now 11 into 70, again, is 6, so 66. 4 left over, add another 0, 40, and I think I've now found that it's going to continue on forever and ever with that 0.63. So it's 2 digits that repeat. So I'm going to say 0.63 repeating. You got to put a repeating bar. Now, I do want to mention this. If you would have discovered right here, you're like, oh, that's going to be a 3, so I'm just going to put a bar over it. Well, I will tell you that this, with 0.636 repeating, is completely different than this, just the 0.63 repeating, because that's exactly what's happening. Make sure you do not stop midstream and put the bar over an incorrect set of numbers. It's 6-3 that's repeating, so that's what you have to put the bar over. Now, let's look at one. I want to do one like number 4, 4 and 7/8. I want you to understand the whole part in a mixed number is going to be a whole part in a decimal, because it's going to be 4 point something. So I'm going to take 7 divided by 8, add my decimal and a 0. 8 goes into 70 8 times, which is 64. There's 6. Add a 0, bring that down. 8 goes in there 7 times, which is 56. 4, bring down my 0. 8 goes into 40 5 times, exactly with a remainder of 0. So you'd say 4.875. I'm going to put it over here because it's hard to fit that all in. 4.875. So whatever is the whole part for the mixed number is also the whole part for the fraction. That is changing fractions to decimals. You are going to be doing a lot of dividing. You're going to add a decimal and make sure that if it is a mixed number, whatever the whole part is there, you put that as the whole part. Remember, if it's digits repeating, you use bar notation. All right, now we're going to change from decimals to fractions. So number 7 is negative 0.14. So that is 2 decimal places, so it is 1400ths. So I know it's going to be negative because the decimal's negative. And I write 14 over 100 and then simplify. And each of these are even, so I'm going to divide by 2 to simplify this a little bit. Negative 7/50ths. And I believe that is as low as it goes. That is a simplified answer. So negative 7/50ths. Next, 0.3, 1 decimal place. So I know that is over 10. Plus it's red, 3/10. So 3/10 does not reduce. That's my simplified answer. Number 9, 0.94. 0.94 really is read as 94 hundredths. So we've got 94 hundredths. I can divide both of those by 2 to try to reduce, and that would be 47 over 50. And that is as low as it goes. Nothing else will reduce or simplify out of that. So 47/50ths. That is changing decimals to fractions. Write them over the place value that they are in and simplify it by reducing the fractions. So we've got changing fractions to decimals and decimals to fractions. Remember, if they started as a negative number, they're going to stay as a negative number. If they are repeating digits, you put a repeating bar over them.